The courtroom was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Across the room, a group of officers sat stiffly, their faces betraying a mix of confidence and unease. They thought they had this case in the bag, until he stood up. A sharp-dressed, razor-sharp black lawyer, armed with nothing but the truth and the very evidence the police had tried to twist in their favor. For weeks, a young man had been fighting for his freedom, wrongfully accused and trapped in a system designed to break him. The prosecution was certain they had him cornered, until this lawyer did the unthinkable. He flipped their own evidence against them, exposing lies, corruption, and a cover-up so blatant it left the courtroom stunned. But the battle wasn't over yet. As the truth unraveled, the question remained, would justice finally be served, or would the system find a way to silence it? The judge adjusted their glasses, glancing between the lawyer and the prosecution. The officers in question sat motionless, their expressions unreadable, but their body language told another story, tapping fingers, shifting in their seats, eyes darting toward the evidence table. They hadn't expected this. They thought their version of events would go unchallenged, that no one would look deeper. But this lawyer had done just that. He had spent nights combing through police reports, surveillance footage, and body cam recordings. And that's when he found it: small inconsistencies, tiny details that didn't add up. A missing timestamp here, a sudden audio cut there. Separately, they might have gone unnoticed. Together, they told a very different story. A story that suggested the arrest wasn't just flawed, it was intentional. But proving corruption wasn't easy. The system protected its own, and if he pushed too hard, there was no telling what they might do next. The lawyer took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew what was at stake, not just for his client, but for everyone who had ever been crushed under a system designed to protect power, not people. Across the room, the prosecutor shuffled his papers, trying to regain control. "Let's not get lost in theories," he said, forcing a smirk. "The evidence is clear. This man was caught at the scene." But the lawyer wasn't done. He stepped forward, holding up a printed police report. "Is it?" he asked, his voice steady. "Because according to this, the arrest happened at exactly 10:42 p.m. He turned to the jury, letting the moment sink in. But the body cam footage tells a different story. The timestamp shows 10:35 p.m., 7 minutes before officers even claimed to have arrived. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The officers shifted again, stealing nervous glances at each other. The cracks were starting to show, but the real question was, how deep did they go? The courtroom felt tighter, as if the walls had closed in. The prosecutor cleared his throat, flipping through his notes, but it was obvious he had no answer. The lawyer pressed on. "So, tell me," he continued, holding the officer's written statement in one hand and the time-stamped footage in the other. "How does a man get arrested before the police even arrive?" Silence. The lead officer, a man with years on the force and a reputation for making cases stick, finally leaned forward. "There's got to be an explanation," he muttered. His voice lacked conviction. The lawyer nodded. "There is. The explanation is simple. This arrest didn't happen the way you claimed." He turned to the jury, his voice sharp. "What else didn't happen the way they claimed?" A nervous energy spread across the room. The judge frowned, sensing the shift. The officers looked at each other, unspoken words hanging between them. They had built their case on confidence, but now that confidence was cracking. The truth was slipping through the gaps, and they were running out of ways to cover it up. But the lawyer knew this wasn't over. If the case was unraveling this quickly, it meant one thing: someone was hiding something much bigger. And he was about to find out what. The tension in the courtroom thickened as the lawyer studied the officers' faces. Something wasn't adding up. The timeline was already suspicious, but there was more. He could feel it. Then, almost by instinct, he glanced back at the evidence table. There it was. A single sheet of paper, barely noticed before, tucked beneath the other reports. He walked over and picked it up, his eyes scanning the document. His heartbeat quickened. This wasn't just another police report. It was a supplemental statement, filed asterisk after asterisk the arrest, and it changed everything. He turned back to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this document was quietly added asterisk after asterisk the fact. It claims the officers had new evidence justifying the arrest. He held it up. But there's one problem. This statement is dated a full asterisk day asterisk after my client was taken into custody. Why would they need to create new evidence if their case was solid from the start? A ripple of shock spread across the room. The officer's rigid expressions began to crack. The lead officer's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The prosecutor shifted in his chair, tapping his pen against the table. The lawyer let the moment hang. Something bigger was at play here. A cover-up wasn't just likely, it was certain. But the real question was, who was pulling the strings? And just how far were they willing to go to keep the truth buried? The courtroom was on edge. The lawyer let the weight of his words settle, watching as the prosecutor and officers scrambled for an explanation. But there was none. The fake report, the altered timestamps, everything pointed to one thing. This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Then, just as he was about to press further, the unexpected happened. A voice, small but firm, cut through the silence. "I have something to say." All eyes turned to a young officer sitting near the back. His hands trembled as he stood. The lead officer shot him a warning glare, but it was too late. The guilt was already written all over his face. The report, the officer hesitated, then exhaled sharply. It was changed. "I was told to sign it after the arrest, to fix the timeline." His voice cracked. "But I didn't know the whole story." Gasps filled the room. The lead officer's face went pale. The lawyer stepped forward. "Who told you to change it?" The officer swallowed hard. Then, after a long pause, he looked at the prosecutor. The room erupted. The very person meant to uphold justice had been part of the cover-up all along. The lawyer had suspected corruption, but this was bigger than anyone imagined. And as the judge slammed the gavel, demanding order, one thing was clear. This case had just changed everything. The courtroom was in chaos. The prosecutor sat frozen, his carefully built case crumbling in an instant. The judge banged the gavel again, calling for order, but the damage was done. The young officer, now visibly shaken, lowered his head. "I didn't know they were setting him up," he muttered. "I was just following orders." The lawyer turned to the jury. "And that's the problem, isn't it?" he said, his voice calm but firm. "People in power count on silence. They count on fear. But today, the truth spoke louder." With the prosecutor exposed, the case was dismissed. The wrongfully accused man was finally free, but justice didn't stop there. Investigations were launched, and those responsible would face consequences. As the lawyer stepped outside, his client shook his hand, gratitude in his eyes. This battle was won, but the fight for justice was far from over.